Hey everybody, this is John Stiles with First Select. I'm bringing you another video in this series that we're talking about 3033 15th Avenue South. It's a great multifamily investment opportunity in the Twin Cities. Just the high-level overview on this property. It's located in South Minneapolis. We've got 8 residential units. It's an affordable housing deal. In addition, there's one buildable lot, and we're selling this all at $105,000 per unit. It would be ideal for somebody that's looking for a long-term hold. Now, we've already talked about the location of this property. We've talked about the housing market overall, some of the property facts, and how the property financials stack up with the income and the expenses. So in this video, we're going to talk about your potential return on investment. After that, we'll get into other value add opportunities, the 4D affordable housing program, and why this deal really makes sense to get in on. So when it comes to a return on investment, we previously talked about the capitalization rate, which came in at 7.4%. And if you were buying the property with all cash, you might look at that as your return on investment. But of course, most real estate investors do go ahead and get financing, which changes things up a bit, and it allows you to leverage other people's money or the bank's money to get a higher return. So let's dive into this a little bit deeper. Now, I am not a lender. I don't play a lender on TV, and I'm definitely not your lender. So the financing terms I'm going to use here are just for an example purpose. And you might find that depending on how you stack up as a borrower and the bank that you choose to work with, your financing might be a little bit different. But just for example purposes, if we put a down payment of 25%, that would be $209,000. That would give us new financing of $628,000. And again, these are not an offering of terms, but if you were able to get 6.5% interest amortized over 25 years, that would result in annual debt service of $50,000. That's going to be your principal and your interest. Does not include your taxes and insurance because that's included above the line on your expenses. So after we look at our net operating income minus this debt service, that is our cash flow, which comes in at $11,398. Now, is this sufficient to make this deal worthwhile? Well, a lot of banks look at a number called the debt service coverage ratio, and they want to see a number of about 1.2 to maybe 1.25 by calculating the net operating income divided by your debt service. So in this case, it comes in at 1.22, which is really right in line with what most banks are going to be looking for. So that's your financing and your cash flow. From there, we can proceed to further calculate our return on investment. So a lot of people might look at that cash flow and divide it by their down payment in order to calculate their return. So in this case, the pre-tax cash flow comes in at $11,398 that we showed on the previous slide. That's a 5.4% return, right? But it really shouldn't be considered by itself. Even though that's lower than the 7.4% cap rate, you might look at that and say, oh, that's not really that impressive. It's not really that great. But what you have to consider is that when you get financing, there's several different components of your return. You do have that cash flow, which is less than your cash flow would be if you didn't have financing. But now you also have your principal reduction. And keep in mind that principal reduction is coming from the revenue of the property. So it's not coming out of your pocket. It's not going into your bank account. It's going into the equity of the property. So your principal pay down for year one of this scenario is at $10,000, $376, which adds an additional 5% to your return. So right now we're at 10.4%. Now, the third aspect that you should definitely consider when you're calculating your overall return is the tax implications, because you may or may not realize, but when you purchase a property like this, you're going to be required by the IRS to depreciate the purchase over several years. Typically 27 and a half years is the number of years that is set by the IRS. And so it's going to vary how this applies to you depending on your tax bracket. But here's a little explanation about depreciation if you're not super familiar with it. It's an amount that's deducted of the purchase price of real estate over a set period of time, like I mentioned. It provides an annual tax shield that enhances your cash-on-cash return. So, for example, typically you would allocate about 80-85% of the purchase price to that can be depreciable, and then the land itself is not depreciable. Again, 27.5 years is the straight line method. There is a possibility to do cost segregation and accelerate that depreciation, front loading your tax benefits. And that would be especially helpful if you're a high income earner and you're trying to offset your income with this type of opportunity. Now keep in mind, depreciation is a temporary benefit. It does get recaptured when the property is sold, and you'd want to discuss that with your tax professional who advises you on these matters. But in this example, if the purchase price is $837,900, your annual depreciation could be around $26,000 per year. Now that's, again, not money that shows up in your bank account, but it gets deducted from your taxable income, which is a really good way to reduce the amount of taxes that you make. So again, depending on your particular tax bracket, this is going to affect you differently, but it creates this increased benefit to you. And when we add that to your cash flow, which is the real cash that goes into your bank account, and we add that onto your principal paydown, which is the equity that gets stored in the property, your overall return could be close to 15% here. And that's not to mention, or not even including, your Minnesota taxes, which could be up to 9.85%, and so this overall picture can get even better when you take that into consideration. Now, we are really getting in the weeds with this type of scenario, and you really want to bring in your tax professional to help you dial in how this property will really help you and improve your return. So now this is just for year one. And we could further dial into this if we looked at a 10-year return, because, your return is not just on year one. Your return continues to grow year after year. And a lot of times, if the property appreciates, as we all hope that it would, you can get a windfall once you either refinance the property or if you sell the property in 5, 7, 10 years, whatever it might be. And so a lot of times we can put together an investment analysis that would include those 10-year projections. But when we're doing that, there are so many different levers you can pull when it comes to how much is rent growth are you expecting? How much expense growth are you expecting? What is the exit capitalization rate or the sale price that you're going to sell it at? Are you going to refinance it at a certain point? And are you going to do anything that's really going to improve your revenue, like implement RUBS, ratio utility billing, or something else that's going to add revenue to this property? So since there's so many factors, we wouldn't really do it justice by covering it in a video. I would recommend that we get together on a Zoom meeting or in person where we can dial in these numbers based on your projections and see how it breaks down. There's obviously other tax benefits. We've already talked about depreciation. There's cost segregation. We talked about accelerating those deductions. And there's also the mortgage interest deduction. There's the operating expense deduction. There's 1031 exchanges. There's capital gains treatment. So many things that make real estate or a deal like this really attractive compared to other opportunities that are out there. So that is a quick summary of your potential return on investment. Stay tuned for the other videos where we'll talk about the 4D affordable housing program and value add opportunities, which make this a great deal for you to consider. Thanks.